Hello everyone, Andy here, and in this video I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about and how to start Warhammer Underworlds, a hybrid board game slash card game that is competitive but also super friendly for casuals that takes around 25 minutes to play once you know how to play the game. A game that wants to rival Magic the Gathering by simplifying the card game but enhancing the positional play and throwing in cool models for good measure. I'll briefly cover the lore, the mechanics, the fun, the different formats, what to expect from the release cycle, the hobby, potential for solo play, online play, how to start collecting, and for any returning players like myself, I'm going to make sure to explain how Warbands from the older editions can still be played, because yes, they can be. At the time of recording, Deathgorge just released and it's November 2023. So if you're watching this in the future, some things may have changed, but this guide honestly is going to be solid through at least all of 2024. Timestamps below if you want to jump straight to it. What is Warhammer Age of Sigmar? Good question. Thank you for asking. Warhammer Age of Sigmar is a high fantasy world that often shows grand clashes between gods and their armies as the four factions of order, chaos, death and destruction all play their hand to rule over the mortal realms, which are made up of 8 connected planes. They all have, really weird names, but essentially they're the realm of fire or ice or shadow or light, and they're all connected by massive realm gates. It's literally Stargate SG-1, but with fewer P90s. Counter-Strike players rise up. Each of these planes have the top side where all of these armies fight, and mortals generally, struggle to survive alongside vestiges of normal humanity. But every realm also has an underworld. Do you see where that's the name has come from? Underworld? Underside? Yep, okay. The other side of the realm plane, and whether that's literal or figurative, we don't really know because Sigmar lore is highly questionable, so let's just move on. And that is where Underworld takes place. Eschewing grand armies for small warbands of highly personalised, unique and strongly themed individuals. If you're familiar with the larger Age of Sigmar factions, then so far every single faction has received at least one warband, but Underworlds manages to bring so much life to every warband that even though you might not gel with an entire faction in the larger game, it's entirely possible you'll find something that interests you in just the few models in Underworlds. And sure enough, with over 40 warbands having been created for Underworlds, there's a huge amount of variety, and Underworlds models are widely regarded as being the best of the best sculpts from Games Workshop, taking the already great model making technology and pushing it to its best aesthetic and dynamism. Great, but what is Warhammer Underworlds? It is billed by Games Workshop as the ultimate competitive game. It's right there on the box, in fact. It is a hybrid between a deck builder and a board game, leaning into one or the other more depending on which format you play. It utilises board game style movement and positioning, along with dice rolling and a deck of cards. It first released in 2017 to a healthy tournament scene, but then got pandemicked, and is now only starting to regrow after several big rules and, more importantly, format changes. The gameplay is pretty much as you'd expect. Your goal is to score the most glory points, and you get these every time you kill an enemy or score an objective from a card in your hand. No matter the size of your warband, whether it's 3 or 7 models, every game is made up of 3 rounds, and within those rounds there are 4 activations per player. At its most basic, there are 3 things you can do, being move, attack, or combine them with a charge. The dice rolling, the core of any war simulation, let's be honest, is you have a dice pool, and then it's simply pass or fail. You never roll more than 4 dice at a time, pretty much. You can get to 5, but whatever. If you get more successes than your opponent, then the amount of damage you do goes through. It's not like for every success you deal that damage multiple times. Taking a quick look at a fighter card, we can see it's clearly laid out and simple. Movement, defense, health, and then your weapon's range, accuracy symbol, and damage. Plus a little block of text with an ability, and then how to inspire your fighter. because every fighter in the game has a stat card with two sides. The side they start on, and then their inspired side, where they gain some sort of buff for completing some sort of event or action. Then we come to the deck of cards. Every deck is 32 cards made up of 20 power cards, which are a mixture of 10 upgrade cards and 10 gambit cards, and then 12 objective cards. Objective cards are how you win the game by completing the conditions on them to gain glory. These will be things like stand on a certain objective or kill an enemy in a certain way. Whoever has the most glory wins the game, but also that glory can be spent on equipment cards, which you spend the glory cost to equip to a fighter, and will typically be an upgraded weapon or being able to move faster, something like that. Then you have gambit cards, and these are cards you can play from your hand for free when they say you can. Examples of this will be things like +1 damage if you roll a certain symbol on your attack dice, or move either your model or move an enemy model or heal, that sort of thing. Keep in mind this is a super brief overview because there are actually 9 core actions you can perform, not just the 3 I mentioned. Honestly, dice pools with binary outcomes are something I personally really like, and it's great to see Games Workshop use this mechanic in one of their games. In my opinion, it makes for a much tighter game while keeping the fun of rolling dice. The models are, let's be honest, great. I love the board game aspect of movement, makes teaching things very simple, and when you start to pull together like how a team works with a specific deck, you can get that combo forming fun that tickles the brain and makes you feel like you're learning and improving. On the flip side, as we're discussing gameplay, as we are rolling so few dice, the game can feel pretty swingy. There's no chance of hitting any average numbers through this game, as most models will roll 2 dice for an attack and 1 dice for defense. A great number of dice for the game to feel light and fast, but a horrible number of dice for consistency in game. When it comes to core models from Games Workshop, there's always a big question about how the game is collected and what sort of list building is in the game. Every warband is a fixed set of models. You never swap these with any other warband, you have a totally fixed list, if you want to, view it that way. Now, list building in Underworlds comes in the form of which cards you take into the game, which brings us on to the different formats or ways to play. This gets a little bit confusing even if you go and read the official Warcom article that explains it, and I say explains it in very loose terms. It's really, they don't do a great job. Most card games have different formats, okay? For example, Magic the Gathering has Commander, Standard, and Draft, whatever. In 40k, you might have, let's say, Match Play, Casual, Open Play, Highlander, etc. Well, in Underworlds, we get Rivals, Nemesis, and Relic. These are all different levels of how much you can customize your deck. Rivals is the most basic and common, if you want to call it that way, form of the game. Warhammer World currently hosts the largest and most frequent Underworlds tournaments, and they exclusively play the Rivals format. Nemesis is equally accessible and is the format that the Warhammer Events team runs, and is pretty much how the game is supposed to be played, I kind of imagine. So for example, at the upcoming Warhammer Champions event, the Underworlds event there will be playing Nemesis. Every warband is sold with a deck of cards unique to it, and this is called a Faction Rivals deck. In the Rivals format, you can play with the Rivals deck sold with your warband, or a Universal Rivals deck, which are sometimes sold separately or come combined with other boxes. You cannot use another warband's Faction Rival deck. And in this format, there is no deck building at all. You play the deck as it comes. Simple. Then there is the Nemesis format. In this format, you select your warband and their specific Faction Rival deck, and then you select a second Universal Rival deck. Using only these 2 decks, you then create a custom deck as you see fit, following the basic rules of 20 power cards, of 10 equipment and 10 gambit cards, and 12 objective cards. Finally, we have the Relic format. This is the largest form of deck building in Underworlds. Again, you select a warband. That never changes. Then, you can build a deck using any card from a Universal Rivals deck and any card from another warband that you share a Grand Alliance with. and you can't have any duplicate cards. And in this format, 12 objectives and 20 power cards are the minimum number you can bring instead of the mandatory number. I have only seen this being played online, and quite frankly, as the name implies, where 40k has Legends, Underworlds has Relic. This format will never be run as an official event from Warhammer, just to clarify. However, this format is, in fairness, how the game began its life, and so if you do want to find games of this online, you can. Now let's talk release method and cycles. If you're familiar with Magic, which has a 2-year rolling cycle, this is very similar. The current release cycle gives us a big box, like for example Deathgorge, every 6 months, which will include 2 new Warbands, their Faction Rivals deck, and 2 new Universal Rivals decks. Then, either side of that big box, we get 1 Warband and 1 Universal deck. This means that in a year there will be 8 new Warbands, including their unique Rivals decks, and 8 new Universal decks. This does change. Sometimes there were fewer Universal Rivals decks released, but you get the rough idea. Getting on to card cycling, at the time of recording, the oldest box that's currently usable is Nethermaze. If you have purchased Shadespire, Night Vault, Beastgrave, Direchasm or Harrowdeep, any Universal cards from them are not currently accepted in the Rivals and Nemesis format. Oh, and another note there, every big box comes with 2 new boards, and those rotate out along with the big box itself and the cards from that season. Apparently board selection is a big deal. I'm not good enough to know, but it is. So when we get the next 6-monthly, yearly box, whatever they decide to do this time, that will push the Nethermaze Universal cards out of rotation. But maybe, like many, you still have some old Warbands lying around. Has Games Workshop really made them unusable? Not at all, my good friend. In fact, they're all completely legal. Those Warbands are no longer sold, their fighter cards and their Rivals decks can't be purchased. But if you have those fighter cards, then their unique Faction Rivals deck is always legal. It's only Universal cards that get cycled out, not Warband specific decks. However, as mentioned, Underworlds has undergone a few format changes. So are your old Warbands from Shadespire and Night Vault still usable? If you have the fighter cards, then you can use those Warbands along with any currently in cycle Universal Rivals deck, no problem. Back when Underworlds first released, they used a different format for deck building that was much looser, so those older Warbands from Shadespire and Night Vault don't have a legal deck for the modern format, but everything from Beastgrave onwards does. Talking about a change in formats, I want to specifically call out this quite big question. It's a card game that takes after other competitive games like Magic the Gathering or X-Wing, right? Do you need to buy every single release to be competitive? When Underworlds first released, you 100% did need to do this, and obviously, due to the cost, that turned a lot of people off from Underworlds. You would have to buy every Warband because you wanted that one card from someone else. Well now, due to the Rivals format, this game legitimately works as a single purchase of a Warband. Well, okay, you need to get boards and tokens to play too, and those come in big boxes. If you purchase one big box, you get everything you need. This can be the recently released starter box, all of which, from the Warbands to the boards, are legal in all forms of play. Despite it being a starter box, it's still all fully legal. Or a regular box like Deathgorge, which gives you not only your 2 Warbands, but also those 2 Universal decks to choose from, making the box a one-purchase Nemesis legal box. The truth is that there really isn't much support for the full Relic format in a public scene anymore, kind of as discussed. So the idea of needing every deck so that you can pull a single card from each into your own deck just isn't reality anymore. But among friends, do whatever you want, and they've given you this form of open play, if you will, so that's nice. Yes, everyone who enjoys Relic just took that as an insult, calling it open play. It's a joke, I'm being funny. Talking of funny, let's talk hobby. I'm a hobby channel first and foremost. I love painting models. Posting a close-up picture of a model to Instagram makes me feel so connected to the community, and no one ever insults me and my painting ability, and in no way, shape or form is the painting community the most toxic thing that's ever occurred on my channel. So good news, this is the only Games Workshop game where it is specifically written into the competitive packs that you do not need to paint your models. Every other GW game stipulates you must have painted models. Underworlds, specifically, you do not need to do it. That's right, this is a board game, not a war game. If you want to keep it as a traditional board game, every faction is molded in its own colour, so you never need to incur the wrath of angry painter nerds on the internet. Big plus points here, really. However, on the flip side, Underworld's models are widely considered to be some of the best GW sculpts that they put out. And with Warbands being a maximum of 7 models, if you like painting, these really are some standout sculpts to express yourself on. Alternatively, there's the halfway house of treating them as what I like to call board game plus models. Pick a colour for the warband, spray them that colour, hit them with a wash of that colour or just black, and then dry brush them up. Very quick and easy, gives the models some depth and colour, but also requires essentially zero effort or skill. And if you really want, like I've done with my Skaven, after doing that board game plus paint job, pick out some weapons with a silver and give them like a glow, one other colour, and just make them stand out a bit. There you go. Now a quick note to online and solo play. This is a purely 2D game, and there are mods on both TTS and Vassal for it. There are discords for those communities where they regularly play games. The Vassal mod gets updated very quickly, so you can play the latest releases almost immediately upon release. Online play obviously is not as fun as in-person play, but sometimes online play is easier for many reasons. I've been playing on Vassal for a bit, and it's pretty good, yeah. I'm using it to play against friends I already know in real life, because I just can't be bothered to drive into town that night, to be honest. 10-10, would bang Vassal. Solo play, or Sandhammer as it's called. Solo playing a full war game is an endeavour with many issues. Not impossible, requires a lot of modifications though. However, there is something magical about a grid. As soon as a grid is in play, in my opinion, solo play becomes a possibility. Due to the card situation, you can't play a true competitive game of Underworlds, because you shouldn't ever know what your opponent has in their hand. But you know, to learn the game, solo play totally works. Not something to buy the game for though. And that is everything you need to know to start playing and the basics of what is Warhammer Underworlds. A game that wants to rival Magic the Gathering by simplifying the card game, but enhancing the positional play and throwing in cool models for good measure. Does it succeed? Only you can answer that in a game that forges its own set of mechanics to create something unique on the market today. This has been Andy. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.